everybody, and welcome to The Last Hit. We're here for episode number 7 as we head towards our playoffs. We are done with the spring split, and now it's the spring playoffs. So we're going to have a bit of a recap of what's happened across the spring split, and also talk about our first matchups as we go into playoffs. I'm Munchables. I'm joined by Clement, by Dagda, and by Lyric. And I have to put a cheeky little disclaimer here that Lyric's internet not so hot right now. So it's very possible that Lyric joins us for parts of the episode and maybe disconnects for other parts. So if he stops mid-sentence, give him a bit of leeway on that one. But hey guys, how are you all doing? Lyric, I'll go to you first because it seems like you are the one that's least likely to be here by the end of the welcomes. So how are you doing, mate?
That's what I'm saying, man. Time is limited. Time is precious, but doing good. You know, split just ended. I haven't been able to cast the past 2 weeks, but playoffs are coming, which means I do get to cast. So, you know, life is good.
I feel like I want to first off just get some reactions from the end of the split, because I feel like this split, we've always been talking about how stacked the LPL is, how crazy it's all been, and how close the top end of our playoffs are. But there's also been a few teams, especially towards the end of the split, where there have been some less than desirable performances out of some of our top teams. So going into playoffs, where do you guys all sit on like how stacked actually is playoffs? How excited are you guys for the playoffs matches? Do you think that there are a couple of like very clear favorites moving into playoffs, or do you think it is as close as a lot of the community are feeling? I'll go to you first, Dagda.
For me at least, I think there's a pretty clear kind of top 3, maybe top 4. Like, I feel like it's JDG, Top Esports, EDG, and RNG that are sitting there. And then I feel like there's a pretty sizable gap between everyone else. But even for, like, kind of EDG and JDG, I'm personally still kind of out on the verdict for them. I think JDG have started to look better as the split has kind of gone on. But certainly kind of week 7, 8, I was still not fully convinced by these guys. And I know they took wins off of RNG and stuff like that, but I still think there's a lot that needs to be fixed in that roster. And same when I look towards EDG, I haven't been impressed with their team fighting for quite a while, especially when it's like if you got Flandre and Makeup on on 2 engaged champions, they just seem a bit all over the place. They're not really following up together and synergizing well. The engage is a bit messy, and I think it comes down to like the performances from Viper and Scouting, a lot of those to turn the fights in their favor. But I think outside of that, I do think it's relatively close. But just there's that distinct top still, and then everyone else.
Okay, would you guys agree with that one? Like, Clement, I'm curious on your take because you've seen a lot of LPL splits, and I'm curious because like I feel like the narrative right now across the community is like this is the closest split ever because so many teams have so many wins.
My answer is not really. Yeah, I think what we have in the league is we talked about bifurcation, and we have a bottom 5, and then we have a top 5. And then everyone in the middle, it doesn't really matter if you're in playoffs or not really in playoffs. You're not really kind of there. It's almost an outside chance for Rare Atom, IG, Suning, or LNG. And I would put FPX in there as well. So there's 10 teams in playoff this time around, but there's only, in my eyes, 5 competitors. You have WE, Top Esports, EDG, RMG, and JD Gaming. Those 5 are your guys that are most likely going to win in championships, and I don't really see an outside chance for the other teams. And I thought that Jordan was musing over my opinion, but it looks like he's actually just dropped because he's closed his eyes and they have yet to open.
It's just the longest blink anyone's ever seen. I do apologize, guys. That's going to be consistent for the episode, but I think it'll be worth it for the snippets of wisdom.
I love the way Lyric was just like, you know what? I'm so done with their opinions already. It's just no.
Yeah, he's not even DC'd. He actually just hung up. All right, well, let's move into our first segment. And unfortunately, guys, there will be no Guess the Player today. We don't have time for everyone's favorite segment. I know there's going to be a lot of heartbreak out there. I'll make it up to you. We'll do double Guess the Player next episode. I don't know why I've just promised that. Let's go to failures and faves, though, because it's the end of the split. Let's have a bit of a recap, and this is going to be our failures and faves for the entire split. So kind of like a bit of a... what's the word? A bit of a conclusion to what the regular season has been. So, Lyric, I'll go to you first. Let's do failures first and then faves. Because I can see that you're actually back for a second, so let's take that glorious moment. We'll do failures first and then end on a high note of faves. So, Jordan, over to you, mate.
my failure is super obvious. It has to be V5. when you just look at where V5 were in summer and where they ended up, it's just super disappointing. And I think it's a very clear reason how they got here. I feel like the biggest contributor is the meta. Like, when we fell out of like strong laning 80 carries that pretty much just provided utility, when we're getting away from like lane dominant mid laners who can impact the map a lot more than like Azir, Orianna, Victor, it's just like the formula for V5 not to do well. And I think on top of that, PP God is also having a much worse split than he had in 2020, which when you factor in that most of V5's plays depended on bot lane having pressure, it's like, okay, like everything that could go wrong for V5 did go wrong, and now it's just left pretty much being the Mole and Weiwei show.
I'm kind of surprised you didn't mention Longxing running it down, or maybe you think Longxing is still an improvement over Biu.
Like, the thing is, I do like to like factor in out of game factors. And when you look at that, V5 ran through 3 top laners early on in the split. It's right that there's clearly some kind of like turmoil there with the team, and I don't think players just get worse, so I don't actually expect that Longxing is a worse player than he was in 2020. And Longxing at Worlds, in my opinion, was LGD's best player. So it's like, okay, V5 clearly has some issues going on behind the scenes as well. I think even Mole, towards the later half of the split, started playing worse, like looked pretty tilted. There's definitely some like out-of-game factors, but had that meta stayed, had V5 gotten off to like a banging start, who knows where they'd be now. But yeah, I definitely still take Longxing over BB though. Like, no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind.
Okay.
I don't need the Shy Junior. And just give me weak side Biu. If you give me weak side Biu, it's fine. I don't want Jace Biu.
Well, I mean, the Shy does like the weak side Jace, I will say. But I do want to bounce off of that though on the point of Victory 5. Does it get better for this team? Like, looking towards summer, is there hope? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Or do you think that maybe this year is just a write-off for V5?
Oh, I'm doubled down. Summer's the split of Victory 5. We saw it in 2020. It's going to happen again. We're going to come after MSI. Riot's going to be like, hey, this meta is really boring. They're going to nerf everything that's meta right now. Varus buff, Jhin buff, Ashe buff, Zoe buff, LeBlanc buff. Bring it all back. Then we're in the same place we were last year. And, I've said it all along. Year of the Mole, the Chinese government, I'm just hoping it happens. And, yeah, 2021 Worlds, V5 is
I just
coming.
want to say, by Year of the Mole, if you're going by the lunar calendar, you have until 2022 for them to finally show up. So even if they don't make it in summer, you still got to split.
Yeah, just the first 3 to 4 weeks of 2022. That's all you need.
Yeah. It can still happen. It can still happen. All right, Dagda, we'll go over to you. We'll do all of our failures first, and then we'll go into the positives and talk about favorites.
So my failure isn't so much of a team or a certain player. I actually think it's more of the entire support role for me. For what has been a role that like should have been able to super step up. Sorry, I thought Jordan was staring intensely at me again, but he's DC'd. I
think he is there. He is there.
He?
He's just a mosaic.
He just doesn't blink much.
Okay. Anyway, I think that like when I was looking towards us in summer the entirety of 2020, I was like, Lumao, this bard, he's a god. He looks amazing. PP God looks insane as well in a lot of his games. And I really thought we were going to see a step up when it came to the support role. But yeah, I really thought we were going to see a lot more from the support role. And I felt like in a meta that started to shift to give so much more power towards supports, I really thought this was going to be a great time for LPL. And for me, I've just been really disappointed to see that we've kind of just got Ming. And then doesn't really matter. I mean, the rest of them are kind of just doing their thing. They're not having that big of an impact. And it's kind of sad for me because obviously like I am a support player and I loved watching these really, really cool plays coming out from like the likes of Lumao and PP God and kind of seeing them really thrive. But it's sad to me that we haven't got to see that same level of skill and that same agency come out of the bot lane that I really expected from this split.
I do think there's a conversation to be had there about supports though, in perhaps our expectations of this year's support pool were too high comparatively to last year's support pool. Because when you actually think about the support pool last year, like look at the supports that we sent to Worlds. There was obviously Lumao, great, Sword Art, great, right? But then you got Mark and Yuyanja, both of which I don't think that great of a representative of how good supports can be in the LPL. And then we lost Sword Art as well. So it feels like, actually, even last year, maybe the support pool as a whole was not that strong. And we just had a couple of standout players, right?
That's also why I'd go the opposite way of being disappointed, because I feel like we lost a lot of the players.
It's one of those where he's just gonna say, no, I disagree. No context required. Just no.
I do want to bounce off that though, and I'm gonna guess that Jordan's gonna hold very similar opinions, but I feel like the bot lane is kind of gated by what supports you can play this split around. It's been pretty much the bot lane has to have the ability for like a level 2 kill at all times in the bot side. So it's actually been very hard for supports to roam. And for me, the greatest support plays have always came out of like LPL's just roaming. The Megan roam, the level 4 setup, going into the Herald early, stuff like that. And this just isn't a split where you can play something like Bard and actually have a good result on it. There's no Enchantress in sight. There's pretty much just there's just Rel, and everyone looks similar to Rel. Oh god, this is gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun, dude.
Yeah, I agree with your point, Clement. Lyric, do you want to finish the point you were making? I don't know who to go to now, because I've gone to both of you simultaneously.
You have. Well, we got the mid-sentence cut off that we wanted, but I also feel like the fact that we lost a lot of our bad supports from last year, should be a reason why we could have been hopeful for 2021 to be better. Kind of going back to your original point, it's like, hey, Yuyanja's gone, Mark's gone. We're getting interesting new players. Joel's coming in, Lucas is coming in and looking like pretty interesting. Yeah, there we go.
So is Jordan.
So,
but yeah, I kind of want to bounce off of kind of some of the Clem was touching on there, where I think the thing for me is just how much Ming has highlighted how much you can work within the tempo moments that you have in a game. And Ming gets so much done on these same champions and the same things like the Alistairs and the Rels, but it's how he uses the time where he's not in lane is so efficient when I look towards other supports. Oh, and he's there for a second, yeah. But
I think he's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, but I think coming back to it, it's just I really wanted to see them off of those initial resets. Iwandi's pretty good at this as well, but basically the way the two of them reset super early, so then they can actually buy themselves more time to get onto the map, move towards top, move towards mid, had more of an impact in the game. And I think that was the biggest highlight for me, was just I'm seeing it in other regions as well. When you looked at the LEC last night as well, we had Kaiser who was kind of showing off what you could do on the Alistair and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely players and styles that can function in this support kind of style of meta that I kind of see with the just using your recall as well. And it just feels to me like a lot of the LPL supports haven't latched onto that yet.
So maybe a stylistic thing. I just want to give context to Lyric on what we can hear in these moments, because I'm not sure exactly what it sounds like to you when you disconnect, Lyric, but for us, I hear everything. When you finally come back, we get everything that you said during the disconnect smushed into 4 seconds or something, or into 1 second. So there, Dagda's talking, you're like, that's really interesting. It was agreed. So I want to continue moving the conversation on. So I'm going to go to you, Clement. What was your failure coming out?
For me, it was kind of BLG. I felt like BLG were a team that, coming in with a big name in aiming, and also Bubu, who had a pretty damn good 2020. I thought this was a team that would be popping off a little bit harder than they were. We knew that their series with when they were sitting right outside of the 8th place mark in 2020 summer was because Fofo and Meteor didn't really get along, and that seemed like a quick fix of chemistry if you could just get Zika to kind of fill in that position. But we had this sort of thing where the meta didn't really favor early tempo aggressive play styles, and Bubu just lost his mind completely. So they're now sitting outside of playoffs, and this is one of my teams where I had a bit higher expectations, especially how good they were doing early split, with champions like Samira and Kaisa being all the hype and aiming being able to deliver that one. So this is really funny, because basically me and Jordan have are coming from sort of the same roots from V5, but I kind of felt like Biu would be that weak side top laner. He would just be a straight tank. The team could forget about him in most of the early games. That was never the case. He went and chasing the solo kill king title for most of the split, and it just wasn't it was kind of a failed team system that happened for them. So I hope this team can kind of slow down. BBU can take fewer risks, and I still think they have a good chance to punch above their weight, even given their mid lane and kind of support talent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think a lot of people are kind of disappointed at the results from Billy, but as you say, there's a lot of talent on this roster, so maybe in summer there can be something that changes up. I'm gonna throw a failure in as well, because I want a moment in the sun. I want a bit of attention, guys. My failure is the two big mid laners in the LPL, Knight and Rookie, both of whom have had a really rough split, and it feels like the mid pool in general in LPL suffers massively when those two aren't firing on all cylinders. It's like, when we've got those two playing like we expect those two to play, I'm like, yeah, we've got some of the best mids in the world. And then those two stop being the best, and it's like, oh damn, actually there was kind of a gap there. And now I'm like a little bit worried about mid lane in the LPL moving forward. And I'm hoping I'm wrong on this one, and it was all just we weren't in playoffs yet, and everything will be fine and dandy once we get into best of fives. But I'm a little concerned about the mid lane pool when it comes to who ends up going to MSI. I don't feel like the best teams in the league right now have like exceptional mid laners that are going to individually carry games in the way that like Showmaker, for example, and Caps, like you expect them to be able to individually carry a game, whereas I'm not 100% confident in like Crying and Scout to be the kind of player that's going to push that home for the team. Not that I don't think they're good, I think they're consistent, but I don't think they're like the 10 out of 10 clutch player, that you expect out of Rookie and Knight. So I do wonder how that's going to shape up the region moving to international play. And I'm hoping that at least Knight can start to look better moving into playoffs, because obviously he has a long time until he has to play because they managed to get third seed. So he has some time to work it out, and fingers crossed Top Esports can be on form by the time they get to play.
It's actually kind of interesting because I think that mids overall in this meta has just taken a significant backseat. Like when you look towards the impact that they've had in metas past and then in this one, I just don't think it's going to be as big of an issue. And I mean, we even saw Scout on the introductory video we had yesterday. He was just like, look, realistically, my job is not to be this big carry. It's to sit there, farm up, scale to the late game, and then have the impact that I can on champions like Azir and Orianna or whatever it might be, but not actually be this big playmaker. It's much more of a facilitator role in the early stages of the game, leading into where you pick up those big late game items. So I think on the grand scheme of things, I don't think it'll hurt us too much, but I do agree with you definitely that it is. I don't know if it's a symptom of, hey, Knight and Rookie, the reason they were so damn good was they would smash you in lane like every single time, and now that you just have a meta where that doesn't matter as much and you can't just use those big advantages as easily, I think that's why we're seeing a bit of a slump, but I don't think it accounts for it fully at the same time.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we'll see how the mid lane pool changes up as we get into playoffs, because I think as well, best of fives and meta changes during best of fives, the kind of the mid-series meta that you get, I think those can certainly change those conversations. But let's go into favorites here. Let's change it up and go a little bit positive and talk about what's going on that we're excited for in the LPL. So I'll go to you first, Lyric, again. What was your favorite thing here? What were you excited about coming through this split of the LPL?
Am I just comedy relief to you, Munchables? How long will this even last before I'm gone?
I believe in you. You could get a sentence out.
I'll be honest. When you asked for a failure and a favorite, I don't have a favorite. There's only failures on my screen, Munchables. I need to go back to a point that I made on a previous episode of Last Hit, that I feel like our league as a whole is just so much weaker. I feel like the only team who has improved since last year in like any capacity is RNG. I feel like RNG obviously are much smarter, as we've talked about. They play side lanes really well. Like their vision, RNG in almost every area, I think, except in terms of like individual star power, is, you know, in between 8 and 10 out of 10. But the rest of the league still feels like JDG seem like they're getting there, but they're still really relying on playing off other teams' mistakes. Top Esports, you just said, like, Knight and 369, in my opinion, both haven't shown up the same way, though I still think they're both performing well. It's just they're not like solo carrying games. Honestly, EDG's the overhyped team in LPL for me. It's like EDG to me are good by the fact that so many other teams are bad. EDG are the team that if we send to MSI that I will be the most worried about if they play like they played during the regular season. You know, maybe playoffs changes, maybe they improve, maybe boot camping or something like that, like practicing against more international teams. But yeah, I think going towards MSI is a very scary thing for me as an LPL fan, unless RNG goes or unless, TS or JDG kind of shape up to what we expected them to be before we come into the split. So you know what? My favorite is the hopes, the dreams of what could be, Munchables. That's my favorite.
I thought you were going to say V5 again.
Yeah, I thought that's where that was going as well.
Yeah, I thought you were.
I want to be honest. I consider doing my favorite as Mole, but let's be honest. I've told this story 100 times. I sing Mole praise every day. It doesn't need to be done today.
Respectable. I appreciate you holding off on the Mole trade, at least for the sake of the episode. Oh, that's kind of harrowing. I was hoping this was going to be a really, really positive note. And your favorite is that the LPL kind of sucks right now. That's the conclusion I'm getting from that.
Whoa.
That doesn't fill me with confidence going to MSI.
I have a caveat. I think it looks like every region kind of sucks right now. So, it's always easy to be most negative on the league you watch every game of compared to the other leagues where you don't have enough time to watch everything, right? But, I've watched some LCK, I've been watching some LEC, and I think all the major leagues look like they're in a similar position. So I think MSI is going to be interesting because of that. I really have no idea what could happen.
I actually want to hit. This is a bit of a tangent, but I kind of want to explore that a little bit because I think it's a really interesting topic. Because you're not the first person that I've heard say that either. I've heard analysts from multiple regions say that they think globally League of Legends has got worse somehow this split. Do you guys have any idea on what the reasons could be for that? Like why it feels like the best teams around the world seem to have somehow got worse at the same time? Is it just that it's spring and it's not near enough to Worlds for teams to really practice as hard, or is there something more to it, do you think?
Well, I kind of know the answer for the LPL, and it's actually a really straightforward one, but it's just the fact that you're going from people playing remote to going back into stadium mode. And you're starting to have home and away stadiums being run up again. And that actually takes a huge chunk away of player time management in terms of traveling, moving around, living in hotels, getting your entire setup running again in different places. And that's kind of the reason where I always felt like the LPL actually overperforms in terms of international events and also their playoffs compared to their regular seasons. It's players just have a lot more time to actually do what other regions do and just practice in their same settings and stuff like that. So, we couple the fact that all regions are coming out of a pandemic and going into more live events and stuff like that. I think that might be a huge reason why we're seeing this kind of shift in performance, where I think players overall, especially a lot of players that are rookies and don't have stage experience, will actually overshoot their metrics by being in the game house environment and staying with teammates the entire time.
Yeah, fair enough. There we go. That answers my question. The one thing I will say, LCK were in the studio the entire time, if I'm not mistaken. I think they majoritively stayed.
Caveat LPL.
Yeah, I think LCK was the only region though, right, that stayed in stadiums. I'm not 100% sure on that though. I don't want to commit to that. Sorry, were you going to say something, Dad?
I don't think they were. I'm pretty sure I saw a couple of them with games in home offices and stuff like that.
I do want to say for LCK, they did have a lot of player changes and coaching changes and rebrands and a lot of confusing, even Damwon, who looks a bit worse, right? I think changing your top laner and your coach are actually two really big changes, even if you are getting another good top laner and another good coach. So Like, it feels like for LCK and LPL, I can at least rationalize why. For the Western regions, I mean, heck, you lads, you guys tell us.
Just get it together, guys. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Just play better. Come on.
Sandbagging.
Yeah. Looking weak so they can go to MSI and pull out all the stops.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on with the favorites anyway. I just wanted to kind of explore that a little bit. Dagda, over to you, mate. What's your favorite?
Yeah, so for me, the favorite, I'm kind of going to change up a little bit. I'm going to change it to like just kind of a most improved, because I wanted to look at for Iwandi for me. He's been super, super impressive for me this split. And when I look at him coming in last year, and we were kind of just giggling at him, going, what's this Janna main doing in the LPL? He's going to get crushed. And then he comes in, and he did. Then he came into Spring 2021, and honestly, this guy's been great. His resets have been absolutely fantastic. He's been really strong in lane. His engages have been absolutely insane. I mean, we all saw that clip against WE where he gets that big 5-man headbutt pulverize, and they still managed to lose the fight because LNG. But I think, honestly, this guy, like, certainly a up-and-coming superstar, and I'm really hoping that we get to continue to see this momentum coming in towards summer, and maybe if he does find a different team and kind of one where he can thrive a little bit more, because as I was talking about, like, with the support roles, there's been a lot of people that have taken that step down for me in terms of the grand scheme of skill and how big of an impact the sports have had in the LPL. So for this guy to be looking really, really strong and kind of coming into his second split, I have high hopes that we'll see him go on to one of these top teams and shine even more so in summer.
Nice, that's good to hear. And I agree that I think Iwandi has had a really fantastic split. I would actually even say, like, even if Iwandi and Light stayed on LNG, if you think Tarzan stays, I actually think that could be an incredibly good squad if they had either a mid upgrade or a top upgrade or both. I actually think that could be a serious contender. Like, if Tarzan had better solo lanes to play around, I think that could be a big team.
I will be the devil's advocate and say I actually don't think that helps them at all.
Oh, really?
I think LNG have one of the LNG by far have the worst mid and late game shot calling, macro decisions, like everything. Pretty much every box you try to check to be a good mid game team, LNG do not check those boxes.
LNG fails.
And though I agree,
we know each other so well, we finish each other's
sandwiches.
Hey. All right, well, we'll leave the LNG point there, I guess. We're going to come back and talk about LNG in our series.
I love it. It's frozen with Lyric doing jazz hands. Jazz hands.
All right, so Clement, your last one on the list. Give us your favorite.
Okay, my favorites are actually the top laners of the LPL and just, kind of in extension RNG in general. Right now in the LPL, we have 8 good top laners that are at top of their game, and they can win whenever they go head-to-head. It's always a 50-50 coin flip. You have Nugri, the Shy, you have 369, Breathe, Bin, Xiaohu, Zoom, and Flandre. And all 8 of them are actually in playoffs. Now, I think that's super cool to see in a league. I feel like it's really impressive to think that we've come from a bottom-centric league now into almost a top lane defining league section. And a lot of times, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Herald setup is so important. A lot of teams are trying to fight, and really what kind of decides whether you win or lose this team is the lane setups, where these top laners are going to come in from the Herald fights, and as such. So I'm super excited for the LPL. I think top lane has been the most exciting lane by far this split, and it's also the lane where we have the most diversity in terms of play styles, in terms of their jungle interactions, and just in terms of the sheer amount of top level players that we have.
Yeah, I think that's the coolest thing about the top lane for me is, like, when you look towards, like, say what Zoom does versus what the Shy and Bin and Bubu do, and then even you look at Flandre, who we've got this guy who can play like super flank heavy top lane team fighting style, or you can just go Jason kick your butt in lane. Like, I love that we get that. All the, as you're saying, the versatility of our top lane talent is so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think one of the really exciting things is just that we get different styles of top laners within that list as well, right? It's not just everyone playing the same champions either. Like you very much have these like weird metas and like a lot of counter picks. Like Zoom bringing out things like Cho'Gath and Set all the time to play around opponents, and different teams play around their tops differently. So it's definitely exciting. I'm just gonna tangent away. I do apologize, guys, because we're gonna kick Lyric out of the episode. I think the internet is too much of a struggle.
Can I have your notes?
I'm just saying, if we sent my internet to MSI, it would guaranteed crush everyone. So,
hey, it's about as inconsistent as some of our top teams, so we take those. All right, well, Lyric, thank you very much for joining us, and we will do some magical graphical changes to.
Can we CGI him in?
It's 3 cameras.
No. You guys are gonna CGI me out right now.
And he's gone.
I really hope that they just fill in the jazz hands photo of him just for his intro.
Okay, well, we've made this episode difficult for the editors. I do apologize. Yeah. But anyway, let's talk about the LPL. So, apologies that conversation got a little distracted and a little sidetracked. Was there anything you guys wanted to add on the top lane conversation before we move on?
No, I agree with Clement. I think it's so much fun to watch and to see how we have had that shift towards a little bit more top lane focus and seeing very different styles, champions, everything else come out from that lane.
I think one of the interesting things is how the junglers interact with the top lane as well, and how many junglers we have that love to focus on the top side of the map. But I want to start talking about the series that we have coming up. I want to do a little bit of a preview of our first 2 series and playoffs, because Clement, I want to go to you first here.
Okay.
Because when I asked you earlier for, like, we were talking about just first impressions of this split and moving into playoffs, you very clearly said, look, there are 5 teams that can win. There are 5 teams that definitely can't. And all 4 of the teams in these first 2 matches are in that bottom 5. So can you give me a little bit more detail on what is lacking from it? Like, is it a similar thing for each of these teams? Is there like one clear thing that's lacking from all of them, or is it different small issues with every team?
I think it's actually the same issue. So the major defining factor between our top 5 and our bottom 5 teams is actually game pacing. We have a meta where action is relatively slow. It's very dragon focused, and we basically don't have a lot of action early, but the teams that can still find kills and still make action happen will excel, while teams that have good players but don't have an early good engine will still make playoffs, but probably not progress much further from there. And if you look at Suning and LNG, Rare Atom, these teams are actually some of our slowest teams in the league, and they all actually face the same problem. They have difficulty finding early action, running a mainly hyper carry sort of oriented style. And against the top teams, they all have pretty bad records. LNG actually has not won a single series against another playoff team, and Suning actually only beat LNG. So if you look at through the playoffs through the lens, you really realize that we have sort of a shadow council. There is a league within a league, and that's the top 5 and the bottom 5. So that's why I kind of made my comments the way I structured them. And I think the biggest thing, if these teams need to step up, is we actually need to see them be able to consistently perform on early kills, which is the only one that can actually do that is Invictus Gaming. Which is why I give IG kind of a question mark, where it's like it's always the same thing with IG. It's like, well, if they perform, they have the best roster probably in the world, but they're IG, so you always put a question mark on it.
Yeah, that's one of the big things, right? That's always the way with IG. You can never. That's the kind of team that when it comes to predictions, I never know what to put with IG, because just because they look like something in the most recent series does not mean that's what they're going to look like in the next series. Like, they absolutely smashed EDG. They destroyed them. I was like, oh my god, IG's back. And then, I don't remember who they were against in the immediate following series. They just looked terrible again. I was like, how? How is it possible to be that inconsistent? Like, the level of inconsistency is honestly astounding. It's kind of impressive that you can so quickly go from, like, world championship level roster to can't remember how to play for a Herald.
So are we going to jump into IG RA first? I feel like that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I feel like we're pretty much already on that topic. So let's hit that series up first. RA versus IG. Let's talk let's start big picture first.
Okay.
Before we jump into like maybe lane matchups and things. What are your guys' expectations of how these two teams are going to be playing coming into this one? Because RA, like statistically, one of our slowest teams in the league, right? They like to take the early game very slowly and kind of build into things. Whereas IG, I would say actually fairly similar to an extent in that they like to find their advantages in the lane, and you can imagine them being quite happy with an extended lane phase. Do you see it the same way that I've just laid it out there, or do you think that IG are going to be really trying to push advantages earlier and try and force skirmishes?
So, I don't know about you, Clement. I think for me, the biggest thing when I look towards RA is just like how messy their team fighting is. Like every single time I seem to look at their game-winning fights or any of the fights that they try and set up around dragons, it's like one skirmish is here, you've got another skirmish over here. iBoy is hopefully on something that he can kind of jump between all the different skirmishes that are happening and try and have an impact and keep himself safe. And then you've got Fofo as well, who oftentimes kind of has to be the big playmaker to save some of these fights. And I think it can work out against some of the lower level teams that will just hop into this and go, okay, cool, we're going to just get brute forced out of this by RA's 2 carries. But I think when I look towards IG, like IG are pretty happy to take these skirmishes. And I think when you look towards like the lane matchups, like Fofo, who has had a brilliant split, like he's been really, really strong in this mid lane. I don't think he's going to be able to come out with the same advantages that he does against someone like Rookie. I think the Shy is going to be able to beat Cube. And then when you start to move in towards these skirmishes, or at least these kind of really chaotic fights, I just don't see RA having the same sort of control that they do in some of their other series against a team like IG.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways we can kind of break down this series. So the way I prefer to go through is to look at the recent history and look at their head-to-head and, kind of go over what happened and then kind of branch out into the subject. So what we've seen from their previous series is that, as you mentioned, the Shy likely wins out the top lane, but the bottom lane was actually a huge sore point for Invictus Gaming coming into this one. iBoy and Hong, for me, are actually like one of the strongest 2v2 lanes, and Hong is my sort of hidden gem. Like, if we had LPL fantasy, this guy would have made me so many points. This guy is statistically a monster. He's actually, statistically speaking, in terms of lane kills, in terms of lane dominance, probably the 3rd best support that we have in the league. And his stats are actually very comparable to someone like Missing. So, for me, this is kind of a top versus bot split sort of matchup going into it. I expect IG to heavily index into their top lane. The Shy and Rookie are likely going to crush their opponents if they get red side and if they go for early game drafts, which I don't think they're going to be punished in this series. They will be punished in the later series because I don't think it's actually an early game meta, but against rare item, probably not. So that's where I think the main difference is going to come from. I think the huge difference maker is going to be Lillian, if he's going to actually be able to keep Cube somewhat close to the Shy and their offensive into the top lane. Xun, for me, is much heavier of a ganker rather than Lillian. Lillian likes to farm a lot. So IG is likely coming into this with the red side strategy, with the top side focus, while Rare Atom, for me, is more going for the bottom side and trying to win off their 2v2 and try to snowball that into Drakes and into sort of a later game strategy where they just play, team fighting and they have the coordination against IG. That's my general outlook of the series, but we can break it down further.
So pretty. I mean, like you've broken that down pretty intensively already.
Really?
But I want to have a look a little bit more at the lane matchups as well, because I first want to focus on that bottom lane, because I do think that that's the biggest weakness for IG, as you say. But also, like when you look at Hung, even last year, he was already a Leona player. Like he loved playing the Leonas and the Nautilus and that. That's where he really shone. And now it's like, those are all the strongest champions in the meta. That is what the meta is all about. So I feel like he's the perfect support for that meta. The one big caveat I have to like RA's bottom lane is iBoy. I was saying this last year, and I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over again, but he just gets caught out so often. Like it happens so consistently that it's like he has a momentary lapse of judgment in these mid games and late games where he just steps too far, stays too long, gets caught out, and it feels like those moments in RA games halt all of the momentum that they've built up for the entire game. It suddenly throws the tempo the wrong way, and then it feels like they're floundering to get back into the game beyond those points. So I worry that if that's the big win condition for RA is winning that bot lane, and then you have your bot laner kind of losing that lead for himself, that's a really, really scary prospect moving into a best of 5 against a team that really will punish you. If you overextend against IG, they're going to punish you hard.
And that's something that I have some stats for. This is one of the things that, I was I couldn't decide which way the matchup was going to go, because on one hand, I kind of felt like, if RA play through top side like they did, bottom side like they did in regular season, it's going to be fine. And then I look at both of these 80 carry damage stats. They're actually super low. iBoy is actually second to last in terms of the damage share. He's at 23%. And when the team's losing, he's at 21%. So that actually means when the team's losing, he does less damage than their top laner, which is is kind of a worrying stat. And like you mentioned, a huge part of it is being him caught out. And I also think that's the vulnerability of Rare Item. Their only consistent source of damage is actually Fofo. And in order for them to win, Fofo needs to deal 29% of the team's damage, which is a tall task to ask for absolutely anyone. So the way I overall, I think I still give IG a little bit of an edge in this series. Personally, I think it's going to be a pretty close one. But I give it a 3-2 edge to Invictus Gaming. And I think a lot of times the game plan's going to say, as we followed, Rare Item's probably going to play around their bot side. But even when they do, it might not matter when it comes into the team fights. Because like you mentioned, iBoy could just die.
Yeah, I do want to... Sorry, go on, Dagda.
Oh, I was just going to say, I pretty much agree. I think the biggest one for me as well is just I think when it comes down to the power that the Shy has in that top lane and working with Shun, I think it's going to be so difficult for Cube to manage. I really think that, and especially the Shy has actually been pretty good this split in the grand scheme of things. We're still seeing some of the Shy moments, but when he needs to step up, or if he is set up to be a carry, he will take over a game. We've seen it on champions like the Aatrox so many times, where he is the sole win condition, he will just carry the game in his back. So I think you do have to be very careful as RA that Cube just doesn't get decimated topside. And I think bot lane, certainly we could see iBoy pop off, but I think it's not going to be as easy for him to get rolling. And as we said, even if he does, I still don't have complete faith that he doesn't just end up caught out to Rookie or Shun or the Shy coming in and surprising him.
Yeah, I will say, for one of the better things for Cube is at least he can just play Scion every game, or that kind of thing. Just be the tank at the top side, just try and chill and farm it out. I think that's a possibility for RA maybe. And I will say, one thing that's very positive for RA, and on predictions, I'm actually saying 3-2 RA, partly just to be a little bit spicy, but partly because I feel like IG, I don't know, in my mind, the big win condition for IG all through last year and this year as well is Rookie, right? Rookie's the star power, and Rookie has had a really rough split. There's no other way to word it. Fofo hasn't. Fofo's been having a great split. I don't think I've ever said this before, but I think Rookie might lose IG this series. I think there might be a serious mid-diff away from IG, which is kind of a crazy sentence to say when you consider Rookie's form last year. I think that could actually be a massive pain point for IG and a huge positive for RA coming into the series.
Yeah, it definitely could be. Rookie, this split is so weird. I think it's a lot of it has been his focus. His roams around the map have been very questionable. Sometimes he will actually just walk past enemies and take a ton of damage and burn flashes. And it's like, what are you doing, Rookie? That was such a... There's a cookie switch right there, and it looks like he accidentally just elbows it at times when he's trying to reach for his energy drink or something, and it's just all downhill for them. So it's been a huge lapse of focus for him. And it's really rare because we haven't seen Rookie really fall into these sort of massive troughs before. I think my diagnosis is he gets so bored with the laning phase in the current meta that it just kind of shuts him out. He's just oh my god, I'm gonna buy a tier and I'm gonna TP and we're gonna farm waves. This is my life now.
Feels like that the Azir picks that we're seeing, it's almost like a mentality rather than a pick. It's like this is the style I'm committing to, whether I'm on Azir or not. I'm just gonna play with the late game.
The Azir one's actually been the really surprising one for me, because like when I saw him pick the Azir last split, I was so hyped for it every time because he was really good on it.
Yeah, right.
And he was like punishing people. I actually went back and I tried to find the clip, but I couldn't get it. But I remember there's one clip where there's like he's like chases a Corki out in over the Raptors pit, and it's just like he's going for it. He traps him in with the Emperor's Divide, and you just see him like hammered away in this guy. It was just like stop hitting yourself style of Rookie, just pure bully out this poor man. But the thing is, like, we haven't seen it this split. He's really just kind of fallen off. And even when we get those Azir picks, we're not seeing the big plays. We're not seeing the lane bully style. And even though he is going for like the Arcane Comet style, where you want to be very aggressive in the lane, he's just not getting those same advantages that we'd expect. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see, because I always got so hyped when I saw these kind of cool picks come in for Rookie. But it's just not working right now.
I will say, though, in this matchup, I actually think if our assumptions are correct, and we never really know about the LPL, but if we're playing on 11.6, I think this is a meta that guys like Knight and Rookie will look upon, and they will smile. They say, oh, Seeker's being nerfed, we have Verdant Barrier being gutted, and then you have guys like LeBlanc and Silas getting buffed. This is what the doctor called for. This is the MSI tune-up where mid laners actually start mattering again. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. And in my mind, what's going to happen is you're going to see most likely Fofo getting the Orianna and Azir. He's going to most likely stay on that tray, played for late game, play for the team fights, while Rookie will have a lot more weapons coming into the meta. I think LeBlanc will be a huge pick for him. I think his Silas is going to be on point, and you are going to get what other pick was there that I wanted to mention? But those two picks for me, like Zoe, sorry, it just kind of slipped my mind. But I think Zoe, LeBlanc, and Silas are going to be huge picks for Rookie coming into this one. And as you mentioned, Dagda, we don't know if it's the Cookie or the Rookie, but if he does go for those earlier aggressive champions, I think what happens is he's not going to win the lane exactly against Fofo. I think Fofo's still too good about that phase. But with the link up with Shun into the top side, that's going to be the deciding factor. If you see an early 3-man dive coming out from Shun, the Shy, and Rookie, I think IG will win the game.
All right, so a lot of pressure on Cube here in this series to perform.
Yes.
So on final note then, as we do need to talk about the other series as well. Final note, I want to ask you guys for your predictions. They'll be going out on social media anyway, but I just want to hear where you guys are settling. I've said 3-2 in favor of RA. Where do you guys sit on this one?
So I'm 3-1 IG. I'm pretty certain that we're going to get this just heavy played through top style, and the Shy can carry with Shun and Rookie kind of being the supporters from the side.
I have revealed my thoughts already. It's going to be 3-2 Invictus Gaming. I feel like, Rare Atom do have their strengths, but I don't think their strengths are necessarily commiserate with their late game strategy. iBoy is a very hard person to keep alive, and winning out the bot lane actually doesn't mean as much when both of their carries are dealing sub 25% of the team's damage into the late game. So I still do favor IG with red side drafting, with the just very clear strategy of just going early game and 3-man into top dog pile.
All right, well, we'll see if you guys are right. I'm saying it's all right, though. So, as the LoL Esports 2020 prediction king, you should just bear that in mind. Anyway, let's move on to the second series. Suning, who I happen to become the prediction king predicting, versus LNG. And I think this one, regrettably, for Tarzan fans out there, for Griffin fans across the world, this one is pretty difficult to predict LNG on, I think. I don't know, man. LNG are just so disappointing to me this split. Like, coming into trying to talk about this series, I feel like Suning are not exactly the best team in the LPL right now, but they have, like, clear strengths. And I think if the game goes on long enough, they're actually pretty good in the late stages of the game, and I think the team fighting is pretty good. LNG, I feel like, I don't know. I struggle to think of good things to say about this team at this point.
Me, for
like,
LNG,
I'm going to just throw it to you guys. Give me some good stuff.
So for me, for LNG, like, I'd always felt to me, when I was watching that they're trying to play to minimize their weaknesses rather than playing to optimize their strengths. And it got really frustrating for me watching them, because when I saw their first couple of series and we had Tarzan on the Olaf playing heavily down around this bot side towards Light and Iwandi, I mean, they got these kill lanes with the Tristana, they snowballed out of control, and they could carry the game through that. But as the split started to go on, Tarzan started to play more on top side and trying to help Mikuya and try and right some of the wrongs he'd made in the laning phases and that. And it felt to me like the game plan essentially became like, all right, Light and Iwandi, if you guys can get kills bot lane and you can snowball yourselves that way, we're going to look good. We're going to have these insane games where we close out super, super quick, and this Tristana or Samira or whatever the hell it is going to look absolutely amazing. But without that kill lane boss, and without picking up those kills, LNG just got to mid to late game. We're like, we don't know what we do. We've got nothing left here. Our front line doesn't do anything. Our back line isn't fed as all hell to actually try and carry us through this mess, and they just fall apart. So honestly, I think that's the biggest issue, is just they don't play to help themselves or play towards their strengths, and from that point on, it kind of just all falls asunder.
I feel like they were one of the few teams way back at the start of the split in like Demacia Cup, where they were picking the Tristana. They were one of the like early adopters, and then since like week 2, week 3, everyone just bans Tristana against LNG. And suddenly like all of that bot lane strength seems to be massively diminished as soon as anyone bans Tristana.
Yeah, I will once again start with the cadaver, and then we can move on to the like dissection. But what we've seen in the regular season has not been very inspiring.
Morbid metaphor.
Well, you know, if you're doing a diagnosis, it's kind of after the fact. You know, you're always doing it when the subject's already dead. So I just want to talk about the past because that's our.
My GP has never diagnosed me while I've been dead. I will say I've been alive every single time I've been to the doctors.
That might be why I don't have my medical license. That's a very good point. But
also,
why it was
just
revoked.
to point out, LNG have still yet to play yet, Clement. You can't
okay. I meant about the regular season. I meant about the regular
and
season.
Be like you're just the angel. It's like you're gonna die in like 23 hours. I hope you know that. It's just like
I meant the regular season.
Right.
So LNG
Anyway,
faced Suning.
give us your diagnosis, Doctor.
And the biggest trouble that LNG had was they are a one-trick weak side top laner. They have no flexibility when it comes to Mikuya. He is going to be weak side 100%. His best champion, everyone knows this, is Gnar, and it's almost always banned away from him. So there's not a lot of flexibility when it comes into that lane, and he's playing up against Bin. So Bin, by the end game, had 19 takedowns that series and only 2 deaths. He was on average plus 70 CS ahead of his opponent. That is not a lane that you're going to come back from in the late game. Hell, that's probably not even a lane you can win early. So essentially what you're looking at LNG, their chances in this series versus Suning is they have to make some early game plays very early on in either the mid or their bot lane, and it has to be a crushing defeat on the for the other side. And I just don't see that happening. I don't really see that happening bot lane. I know you have a lot of praise for Iwandi, but I think Huanfeng has been playing defensive in his bot side this entire season, and he's actually been doing pretty okay. So my only glimmer of hope for LNG is a super aggressive early game strategy coming in from Icon and Tarzan, and to shut Angel completely down and to overrun SOFM. I think it can be done. SOFM has been known to play very aggressive onto Scuttles, and you can kind of punish him there. But that's really my only out. There is no late game hope for LNG. Bin will single-handedly consume him, regardless of the number of carries you're going to ban out. He has the Jax, he has the Camille. It's just way too hard to keep him completely from bullying out Mikuya in this series.
So the conclusion I'm drawing there is basically win fast or don't win. For
pretty
LNG.
much.
The longer this series goes on, the more it favors Suning in your eyes.
Yeah. And the weird thing about LNG is they're not actually a good front-to-back team-fighting team either. I think that's what really hurts them. A lot of teams you can play with a weak side top laner, but then it means you have to be very strong on the bottom side, and it means that you have to be able to play team fighting. The thing about LNG is they don't really have the coordination to go into the late game team fighting either, which is sort of the reason why that they're sitting in their current place. If you look at how they actually win games, it's only been against the bottom half of the league, and the way they have won is through sieging and pushing. It's through macro edge. It's not actually through teamfight execution. And that is why that they have a very high priority on pushing bot lanes. Not necessarily 2v2 bot lanes, but pushing bot lanes. The Tristana for them is sacrosanct. They use that to just push down towers. They do Herald plays very on point. They are very good at trying to snowball away to Herald and to trade sides on the map. That's their bread and butter play. But if they cannot close out early with that Herald advantage, then they go into a really mucky team fighting phase where they eventually lose out. So that's the general picture for LNG. While on the other end for Suning, yes, they have a very slow early game. They don't really go for early objectives. They try to hang around and try to get farm. They don't really have a strong side in the early phases, which I consider them. This is why I consider them one of the weaker teams in the playoffs. But when it comes to the late game, they're firing on all cylinders. Wenfong is probably one of your best carries. Bin is probably one of your best carries. And then you have Angel, who's on Kassadin and Azir in the late game, which auto-ends games. So the difference really couldn't be more stark past the 30-minute mark. Their LNG have to win early or not at all.
And I feel like that's kind of very positive for Suning when it's not been the way that LNG has played across the course of the split. But I do want to focus a little bit more on Suning because I feel like the majority of this has been like the weaknesses of LNG. Let's talk positives for Suning. So outside of just the team fighting, obviously they've got Bin up in the top side. I do want to talk a little bit about SOFM. I feel like it's almost rude not to give a little bit of a bit of notice to SOFM because I feel like Dagda coming into playoffs, he's got to have some up his sleeves. Like we've seen teleport Kane coming out of this guy, red Kane with lethality. I was talking to Jamada actually from LLC, who's a bit of a Kane one trick, and he was saying that red Kane with lethality is actually not as insane as it sounds. And we don't really have time to go into that, but I'll maybe get him to go into that at some point on some broadcast or other. But Dagda, talk to me about some positive stuff here for Sud.
Yeah, well, I think certainly it's been touched on a little bit by Clement, where I think they have been really, really strong when they're not under any sort of pressure and they can just play the slow game. Like SOFM has been really good in getting in, invading, using the pushes that his lanes have and actually getting some advantages for himself. He has overstepped sometimes, but in the grand scheme of things, he's been pretty good. And I think that the hardest thing for LNG is, as Clement was saying, how safe a lot of the laners on Suning play. Like Wanfeng and On in the bottom lane, they don't actually... At the beginning of the split, On was making a lot of mistakes, but as the split went On started to make less and less of those mistakes. He wasn't getting caught out. He still isn't capitalizing on advantages that they have, but certainly he's not giving advantages to their opponents as much. So I think if you're looking for the LNG to try and snowball through bot lane, it's not going to happen. I think Angel is, as he said, just perfectly happy to just farm it out and wait to that later portion of the game where he can have his big plays on the Azir, like he picked up that pentakill a little while ago. And then when you look towards Bin, he's been super dominant still in lane. I know it's had a little bit of a rougher split this time, but he's still crazy, crazy good. And when you have SOFM who's able to like play off of both side lanes and make sure that he's able to get these invades off, try to shut down the opponent's jungler, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for Tarzan in this one, where Tarzan is someone who likes to try and interact with the lanes a lot more and isn't as efficient when it comes to his clear. And I think that's something that SOFM can punish quite significantly.
All right, well, I think on that note, I'm just going to move on now to quickly putting some predictions down because we're getting towards our 1 hour mark and that is our deadline, unfortunately. So we do have to start to round up the show. So, Clement, I'll go to you first this time.
All right.
I think I already know what your guys' predictions are going to be, but let's just put LNG out of their misery.
My answer is 3-0 for Suning. The only X factor I could potentially see, the biggest difference in stats when LNG win versus when they lose, is actually Tarzan's damage percent. If they win, he's actually plus 20%. So he's on things like the Graves. He's actually making an impact past the early game. And I think that's what they have to do here. They're going to have to treat Tarzan as a secondary carry. I don't expect them to get big wins anywhere else. It has to be mid-jungle the entire way. And if he can get a lead there, pick something that actually has some scaling potential, like the Kane, like the Graves. It might be pretty weird to see these champions out of Tarzan, but I think that's what he's going to have to go for, and he's going to have to be that late game missing carry to go up against Suning, because even though we said it, they have to go in early, I don't think it's actually feasible, so he's going to have to be sort of like this backup.
All right, Dagda.
Yeah, I'm going to go 3-1 to Suning. I think LNG will find one game where they're able to get a catch. I think they will find a game where they get a catch on, and they can snowball a little bit of that pressure in the bottom side and actually pick up a win. But I agree with Clement, where it's like, I think Tarzan does need to step up as a secondary carry, but I think he's going to go back towards Udyr. I think he's going to go back towards Olaf. We're not really going to see him step up to be that big carry role. And I think that's going to be where LNG fall down. And Suning can then just play the game that they want to play, scale into the late portion, and take it over.
All right, well, I'm going to agree with Dagdar on this one. I've also said 3-1 to Suning. Not really as a big positive to LNG, more that I just don't think Suning are that clean right now, and I feel like they are going to mess up in at least one game of the series.
The problem is, it doesn't matter if they aren't that clean. In the late game, they have been. So it's kind of like, if you guarantee to go to the late game with Jax and Cassidy, you don't really have to be that clean.
That's true. That's very true. But with that, that's our predictions down. That is our episode done, guys. Thank you very much for joining me, and shout out to Jordan wherever you are in the world now. I hope you've lived a good 30 minutes. But that is going to close out the show. So thank you very much for joining me, guys. And we will see you guys in playoffs. It begins in a couple of days. I don't know what day this episode specifically is coming out, but it begins on the 1st. Make sure you're there. We'll be there. We'll be in Twitch chat if we're not casting. I'll see you guys in playoffs.